Female bear begs this human boy to save her mate. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The mist hung low over Pine Ridge Valley, wrapping the mountains in a soft gray blanket. 10-year-old Jacob Bennett sat at the edge of his porch, watching as the morning fog drifted between the tall pines. His sketchbook lay open on his lap, pencil poised above blank paper. The forest called to him today, as it often did. "Jacob, don't forget your lunch if you're heading out." His mother's voice drifted from inside their cabin. "I won't, Mom." Jacob carefully tucked his sketchbook into his backpack and went inside to grab the paper bag lunch his mother had prepared. Ham sandwich, apple, and his favorite chocolate chip cookies. "Stay on the marked trails, Jacob. And be back before sunset," she reminded him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Her eyes, warm but worried, searched his face. "Promise me." Jacob nodded. "I promise. I just want to draw the otters by Silver Creek. I won't go far." Their cabin sat at the edge of Pine Ridge Village, a small settlement of just over 200 people nestled at the foot of the Cascade Mountains. Everyone knew each other here, and most importantly, everyone knew the rules about the forest. The wilderness was beautiful, but demanded respect. Jacob set out along the familiar dirt path that led from their backyard into the trees. The morning air was cool against his face, carrying the sweet scent of pine and damp earth. Birds called to each other overhead, and somewhere in the distance he heard the rushing waters of Silver Creek. He had discovered the perfect spot for watching otters last summer, a flat rock that jutted out over a calm pool in the creek where the playful creatures often gathered. It was his secret place, one he hadn't shared even with his best friend Michael. The trail wound through increasingly dense forest. Jacob kept his eyes sharp for any movement: deer, rabbits, even the occasional fox. He loved drawing all of them. His backpack bounced gently against his spine as he walked, a comforting rhythm that matched his footsteps. He was humming softly to himself when he first heard it, a low sound that didn't belong among the usual forest noises. Jacob stopped, holding his breath to listen. There it was again, a deep, rumbling groan that prickled the hair on the back of his neck. Bear. Everyone in Pine Ridge knew what to do if they encountered a bear. Make yourself big. Back away, slowly. Never run. Jacob had practiced the drill countless times with his dad during their hikes, but this didn't sound like an angry bear. It sounded hurt. Curiosity pushed against his caution. He moved forward slowly, stepping carefully to minimize the sound of twigs breaking beneath his shoes. The groaning grew louder, punctuated now by another sound, a higher-pitched whine that rose and fell like a question. Jacob paused at the edge of a small clearing. The sight before him froze him in place. A massive brown bear lay on its side, half trapped beneath a fallen tree trunk. Its breathing came in labored pants, chest heaving with each intake of air. Next to it, another bear, smaller with lighter fur, paced in agitated circles. The female bear. She stopped suddenly, her nose lifting as she caught Jacob's scent. Time seemed to suspend as their eyes met across the clearing. Jacob's heart hammered against his ribs. "Run!" his mind screamed. But his feet remained rooted to the ground. The female bear didn't charge. She didn't rear up or roar a warning. Instead, she took a hesitant step toward Jacob, then looked back at her fallen mate, then again at Jacob. The pattern repeated: step, look, step, look. Her eyes never left his face, and there was something in them that Jacob couldn't name, something that seemed impossible in a wild animal. Desperation. pleading. Jacob had heard stories from the village elders about the unusual intelligence of the mountain bears. They remember faces, old Mr. Harrison had told him once. They know who means harm and who doesn't. But this was different. This bear wasn't just recognizing him as harmless. She was asking for something. The injured male bear let out another groan, weaker this time. The sound snapped Jacob's attention away from the female. The tree trunk that pinned the bear was massive, far too heavy for Jacob to move alone. Dark blood matted the fur on the male's hind leg, and something metal glinted in the dappled sunlight. A trap. Anger flashed through Jacob. Trapping was illegal in these woods. His father, who worked with the forest rangers, had explained how poachers sometimes came in the night, setting cruel metal jaws to catch whatever wandered by. The female bear made a chuffing sound, drawing Jacob's attention back to her. She had moved closer now, close enough that he could see the individual hairs of her coat, the moisture on her snout. Jacob's mouth went dry with fear, but something deeper than fear held him in place. Those eyes. They held a mother's worry, a partner's fear. The same look his own mother had when his father was late coming home during winter storms. I can't move it," Jacob whispered, gesturing toward the tree trunk. "I'm not strong enough." The bear tilted her head, as if listening. Behind her, her mate's breathing grew more ragged. Jacob took a step backward. The female bear made a low, urgent sound. "I'll get help," he said, louder this time. "I'll come back, I promise." He wasn't sure if the bear could understand his words, but something in his tone or his manner seemed to reach her. She backed away, returning to her mate's side, laying her massive head gently against the injured bear's neck. Jacob turned and ran. Not away from the bears, but toward home, toward help. His lungs burned and branches whipped at his face, but he didn't slow down. Images flashed through his mind, the metal trap, the labored breathing, the pleading eyes of the female bear. He burst from the tree line into his backyard, startling his mother who was hanging laundry on the line. "Jacob, what's wrong?" She dropped the wet shirt she was holding and rushed to him, hands automatically checking him for injuries. "Bears," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. "In the forest. One's hurt, trapped. We need to help." His mother's face paled. "Bears? Jacob, you need to stay away from—" "No, Mom, you don't understand." The words tumbled out in a rush. "The female bear, she asked me for help. Her mate is caught in a trap, and there's a tree fallen on him, and he's bleeding, and—" "Slow down, sweetheart." His mother's voice was calm but firm. "What do you mean she asked you for help?" Jacob struggled to explain. "She didn't attack me. She looked at me and then at him over and over, like she was showing me. Mom, we have to call Dad, please." Skepticism clouded his mother's face, but concern for his obvious distress won out. She nodded once and pulled her phone from her pocket. "I'm calling your father, but you are staying here, Jacob. Promise me." Jacob crossed his fingers behind his back. "I promise." His mother dialed, turning slightly away as she explained the situation to his father. Jacob caught fragments. "Says there are bears, one injured, trap, he thinks. No, he's fine, just scared." When she hung up, her expression was serious. "Your father is bringing Rangers Mills and Dawson. They'll be here in 20 minutes. "But the bear might die by then," Jacob protested. "Jacob Bennett, you are not going back into those woods alone. Your father knows what he's doing. He'll help the bears if he can, but safely." The 20 minutes felt like hours. Jacob paced the porch, unable to sit still, unable to forget the labored breathing of the injured bear, the desperate eyes of his mate. When his father's truck finally pulled into their driveway, Jacob ran to meet it. 2 forest rangers emerged alongside his father, all wearing their green uniforms. Jacob's father, Ranger Thomas Bennett, knelt down to his son's level. "Tell me exactly what you saw, Jacob." "Every detail." Jacob described the scene, the fallen tree, the trap, the strange behavior of the female bear. As he spoke, he saw the rangers exchange glances. "Sounds like a poacher's trap," Ranger Mills said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We've had reports of activity in this area." "And you say the female bear seemed to be asking for help?" His father's voice held no mockery, only professional curiosity. Jacob nodded vigorously. "She kept looking at me, then at him, then back at me. She could have attacked me, Dad, but she didn't. She needs our help." His father stood, adjusting his hat. "All right, we'll check it out, but you're staying here with your mother." "Dad, please. They might not be there when you arrive. I need to show you exactly where they are." The rangers conferred quietly. Finally, his father sighed. "You can lead us to the clearing. But when we say stay back, you stay back? Clear?" Relief flooded through Jacob. "Clear." His mother wasn't happy about the arrangement, but eventually relented when Ranger Dawson promised they would keep Jacob well behind them if there was any danger. The small group set out, with Jacob leading the way down the trail. His mind raced ahead. Would the bears still be there? Would the male bear still be alive? What if the female attacked when strangers approached? Questions without answers propelled his feet forward, faster than was probably wise. "Slow down, son," his father called from behind. "We need to approach carefully." Jacob forced himself to slow his pace, though every instinct urged him to run. The forest seemed different now, each shadow potentially hiding danger, each sound possibly the last breath of a dying bear. He had never felt such urgency before, such responsibility. As they neared the clearing, Jacob raised his hand in the signal for quiet that his father had taught him. The group halted, listening. The groaning had stopped. Jacob's heart sank. Were they too late? Then they heard it. A different sound now. A low, repetitive whine. The female bear, calling to her mate or mourning him, Jacob couldn't tell which. "That's them," he whispered, pointing ahead. His father nodded, motioning for Jacob to stay behind as the 3 rangers moved forward silently, tranquilizer guns ready. Jacob held his breath, watching as they disappeared into the thicker foliage. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then his father's voice called back, "Jacob, come here." Slowly. Puzzled but hopeful, Jacob moved forward until he reached the edge of the clearing. The scene was just as he had left it. The male bear trapped beneath the fallen tree, the female standing guard. But now the female bear's attention was fixed entirely on the 3 rangers who stood at the opposite side of the clearing, weapons raised but not firing. "She won't let us approach," his father explained quietly. "Gets agitated whenever we try, but she seemed calmer when she heard your voice." Jacob swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" "Talk to her," Ranger Mills suggested. "Like you did before. We need to tranquilize both of them to safely remove that trap and lift the tree, but we can't get a clear shot with her moving like that." It seemed impossible, crazy even. Talk to a wild bear? But Jacob remembered those eyes, that strange connection he had felt before. He took a small step forward. "Hey," he called softly, feeling slightly foolish. "Remember me? I brought help, just like I promised." The female bear's head swung toward him, her dark eyes fixed on Jacob, and for a moment he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then, incredibly, she made a low, huffing sound and sat down, still beside her mate but no longer pacing aggressively. "That's it. his father breathed. "Keep talking, Jacob. Ranger Dawson is going to take the shot now." Jacob continued to speak in a soft, even tone, words spilling out almost without thought. "They're going to help him. I know you're scared, I would be too, but they know what they're doing. My dad helps animals all the time." The female bear remained still, watching Jacob, seemingly hanging on his every word. Ranger Dawson raised his tranquilizer gun, took careful aim, and fired. The dart hit the female bear's shoulder. She jerked in surprise, letting out a startled woof, but didn't charge. Seconds ticked by as the sedative took effect. Her massive head began to droop, her body swaying slightly. Finally, she slumped to the ground beside her mate, her eyes closing. A second dart ensured the male bear would remain unconscious during their work. Only then did the rangers move in, with Jacob's father signaling that it was safe for him to approach as well. Up close, the situation looked even worse. The metal trap had caught the male bear's hind leg, its cruel teeth digging deep into flesh. When the bear had tried to free himself, he had apparently dislodged the dead tree, which had then fallen across his midsection. "It's a miracle he's still alive," Ranger Mills said grimly, examining the injuries. "We need to get this trap off first, then move the tree." The next hour was a blur of activity. Jacob watched in awe as the rangers worked with practiced efficiency, first disarming and removing the vicious trap, then using leverage systems to gradually lift the massive tree trunk off the bear's body. His father applied first aid to the wounded leg, cleaning and bandaging it as best he could in the field. "Will he live?" Jacob asked, his voice small against the enormity of what they were doing. His father looked up, his expression cautiously optimistic. "His vitals are strong, considering. Bears are incredibly resilient creatures, Jacob. If infection doesn't set in, he has a good chance." They worked until the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Both bears remained sedated, their massive chests rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of drug-induced sleep. Finally, Ranger Mills straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "That's all we can do here. The tranquilizers will wear off in a few hours. We should be gone by then." "What about the poachers?" Jacob asked. "They might come back." His father's face hardened. "We've collected evidence from the trap, fingerprints, manufacturing marks, and we'll be increasing patrols in this area. Believe me, we'll find whoever did this." As they prepared to leave, Jacob found himself reluctant to go. Something about the bears, their vulnerability, their trust, held him in place. He knelt beside the female bear, careful not to touch her but close enough to see the individual hairs of her fur, the slight twitch of her ears as she dreamed. "Goodbye," he whispered. "Take care of each other." His father placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Come on, son, we've done what we can. Nature will take its course now." The walk home was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts. Jacob kept replaying the events in his mind, the female bear's eyes, the way she had seemed to understand, the trust she had placed in a small human boy. It felt impossible, magical even, yet he had witnessed it with his own eyes. When they reached the cabin, his mother was waiting anxiously on the porch. Her relief at seeing them safe quickly turned to amazement as they recounted what had happened. "I've never heard of such a thing," she said, shaking her head in wonder. "A bear seeking human help. Animals are more intelligent than we give them credit for," Ranger Mills commented. "Especially these mountain bears. They've lived alongside humans for generations. They observe, they learn." That night, as Jacob lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. The day's events kept playing through his mind like a movie he couldn't pause. He wondered about the bears. Were they awake now? Was the male bear in pain? Would they remember him? Outside his window, the forest stretched dark and mysterious under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, two bears fought for survival together. And somehow, against all odds, they had reached across the divide between species to ask for help. Jacob smiled into the darkness. He had a feeling this wasn't the end of their story. The next morning, Jacob woke to the sound of his father's radio crackling in the kitchen. He rubbed sleep from his eyes and padded downstairs in his socks, following the smell of pancakes and the low murmur of adult voices. "Morning, sleepyhead," his mother said, sliding a stack of blueberry pancakes onto a plate. "Your father was just telling me about the plan for today." Jacob looked questioningly at his dad, who sat at the table with a mug of steaming coffee, his ranger uniform already on. "We're going back to check on the bears," his father explained, stirring honey into his coffee. "Standard procedure after a rescue like yesterday's. We need to make sure the male bear is mobile and that infection hasn't set in." "Can I come?" The question burst from Jacob before he could stop himself. He expected an immediate no, but to his surprise his father seemed to consider it. "Actually, Ranger Mills suggested you might be helpful. The female bear responded to you in a way I've never seen before." He took a thoughtful sip of coffee. "But you'll stay at a safe distance this time, no exceptions." Jacob's heart leapt. "I promise. When do we leave?" "After breakfast. Eat up." Jacob had never devoured pancakes so quickly in his life. His mind raced with possibilities. Would the bears still be there? Would the male bear be standing, walking even? And would the female remember him? An hour later, Jacob sat in the passenger seat of his father's truck, binoculars hanging around his neck. They were meeting Rangers Mills and Dawson at the station first to gather supplies and discuss strategy. Jacob tried to contain his excitement as they pulled into the small parking lot of the Pine Ridge Ranger Station. Inside, maps covered the walls, and a dispatch radio crackled with occasional updates from rangers in the field. Ranger Mills was already there, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She smiled when she saw Jacob. "Our bear whisperer has arrived," she said, but her tone was kind, not mocking. "How did you sleep, Jacob?" "Okay, I guess. I kept thinking about them." "That's natural. It was quite an experience." She turned to a large topographical map on the wall, pointing to a section marked with a red circle. "We're going to approach from the east this time. The wind will be at our backs, so they'll catch our scent early. Less chance of startling them." Ranger Dawson arrived carrying several cases of equipment. He nodded to Jacob. "Ready for round 2, kid?" Jacob nodded, trying to look confident and capable. Inside, though, his stomach fluttered with nervous energy. The events of yesterday felt almost dreamlike in the morning light. Had he really stood face to face with a wild bear who asked for his help? It seemed impossible. "We've got a situation," announced Ranger Chen, emerging from the radio room. Everyone turned to look at him. Hikers reported seeing blood on the North Trail, about half a mile from where you found the bears yesterday. Jacob's father frowned. "Fresh blood?" "They think so. And large paw prints heading west." The rangers exchanged glances, and Jacob felt tension fill the room. His father turned to him. "Change of plans? You're staying here with Ranger Chen?" "But Dad, this could be dangerous, Jacob. If the male bear is bleeding and moving, he's wounded and vulnerable. That makes him unpredictable." Disappointment crashed through Jacob, but he saw the logic. Still, after coming this far, "Actually," Ranger Mills interjected, "if the bears have moved from the clearing, Jacob's presence might be more valuable than ever. The female trusted him. If they're in distress, he might be our best chance at a peaceful approach." Jacob held his breath as the adults debated. Finally, his father sighed. "You stay in the truck until we assess the situation. If, and only if, we determine it's safe, you can join us. But you follow every instruction immediately. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Jacob tried not to look too excited, but from his father's expression he wasn't succeeding. The drive to the trailhead was tense. No one spoke much, and Jacob spent the time watching the trees flash by, wondering what they would find. The blood on the trail was worrying. Had the male bear's wounds reopened? Or worse, had the poachers returned? They parked at the small lot that served the North Trail and geared up. First aid kits, tranquilizer guns, radios. Jacob was instructed to wait in the truck while the 3 rangers did an initial scout. He watched through the windshield as they disappeared into the tree line, his fingers drumming anxiously on his knee. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Jacob stared at the digital clock on the dashboard, watching each minute tick by with excruciating slowness. After 23 minutes, he'd counted, his father's voice crackled over the radio left on the seat beside him. "Jacob, come in. Over." He fumbled with the device, pressing the talk button. "I'm here, Dad. Over. We've found blood trail and tracks, no bears yet. We're going to continue a bit further, but I think it's safe for you to join us now. Follow the North Trail until you reach the large boulder shaped like a turtle. We'll meet you there. Over." "On my way. Over." Jacob couldn't help the grin that spread across his face as he jumped out of the truck, slinging his small backpack over his shoulder. The North Trail was wider than the path he usually took, clearly maintained for hikers. He moved quickly, eyes scanning the ground. About a quarter-mile in, he spotted the first evidence, dark droplets of blood on the pale dirt, already dried to a rusty brown. His pace quickened. The Turtle Rock was unmistakable, a large boulder that did indeed resemble a turtle, its head pointing west toward a denser part of the forest. The rangers waited there, conferring quietly. "Blood trail gets heavier beyond this point," his father explained when Jacob reached them. "And there are 2 sets of prints now, both bears moving together." "She's helping him," Jacob said with certainty. Ranger Mills nodded. "That's our theory, too. The tracks suggest the male is limping heavily, leaning against the female at times. But why would they leave the clearing?" Jacob wondered aloud. "Wouldn't it be better for an injured bear to stay still?" "Generally, yes," Ranger Dawson replied. "Unless they felt threatened, or needed something they couldn't get there. Water, perhaps, or a more sheltered spot. Or," his father added grimly, "they were running from someone." The implication hung in the air. Poachers. They continued following the blood trail, which now veered off the established path and into denser forest. Jacob stayed between his father and Ranger Mills, his senses on high alert. The forest seemed quieter than usual, fewer bird calls, less rustling in the underbrush. Even the insects seemed subdued. "Animals sense tension," Ranger Mills explained when Jacob mentioned it. "If there's a wounded predator or human hunters around, everything goes quiet." The blood drops became smears, then puddles. Jacob's worry grew with each step. How much blood could a bear lose before? He pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the tracks. The female bear's prints were clear and purposeful, while the male's dragged unevenly, one hind paw barely making an impression. They had been walking for nearly an hour when Ranger Dawson, who led the group, suddenly raised his hand for them to stop. He pointed silently ahead. Beyond a screen of young pines lay a small, rocky outcropping above a narrow stream. And there, partially concealed by the rocks, was a dark shape. "Is that?" Jacob whispered. His father nodded, binoculars already raised to his eyes. "The male bear, he's alive, I can see him breathing. but I don't see the female. Ranger Mills scanned the surrounding forest with her own binoculars. No sign of her. Could she be hunting? Bears don't usually leave their injured mates, Ranger Dawson said, especially not after showing the kind of attachment this one has. A prickle of unease ran down Jacob's spine. Something wasn't right. Where was the female bear? He took a few steps to the side, trying to get a better angle on the outcropping, when a flash of metal caught his eye. "Dad," he said urgently, pointing. "Over there, by that fallen log." His father swung his binoculars in the direction Jacob indicated. His sharp intake of breath confirmed Jacob's fear. Another trap, bigger than the first. Is something in it?" Jacob asked, dreading the answer. The grim set of his father's mouth told him everything before the words came. The female bear, and she's not moving. Jacob's world seemed to tilt sideways. Not after everything. Not after she had trusted them, had asked for their help. "We need to move now," Ranger Mills said, already checking her tranquilizer gun. "If she's still alive, every minute counts." They approached cautiously, mindful of the injured male bear who might defend his mate despite his own wounds. But as they drew closer, it became clear that the male was in no condition to charge. He lay on his side, breathing shallowly, his bandaged leg now soaked with fresh blood. The female bear was about 30 yards away, her front paw clamped in the massive jaws of a trap similar to the one that had caught her mate. Unlike the first trap, however, this one was attached to a heavy chain, which in turn was secured to a nearby tree. The bear had clearly been struggling. The ground around her was torn up, the chain pulled taut. "She's breathing," Ranger Dawson confirmed, checking through his binoculars. "Probably exhausted herself trying to get free." "Same poacher," Ranger Mills said, her voice tight with anger. "Look at the trap design, identical to yesterday's." Jacob's father radioed for backup, his voice controlled but urgent. Then he turned to the group. "We can't wait. Mills, Dawson, prepare to tranquilize the male first. We need to secure him before we approach the female." "Dad," Jacob said quietly, "let me try something first." His father looked at him sharply. "This isn't yesterday's situation, Jacob. Both the bears are injured and stressed. It's too dangerous. Please, just let me talk to her. From here. If she responds like before, it might make everything easier." The Rangers exchanged glances, weighing the risk against the potential benefit. Finally, his father nodded once. "You stay right here. No closer. And at the first sign of aggression, we tranquilize both bears." "Understood?" Jacob nodded, then turned toward the female bear. She was conscious but still, her dark eyes open but dulled with pain and exhaustion. He cupped his hands around his mouth and called softly, "Hey there, it's me again. We've come to help you, just like before." The bear's head lifted slightly at the sound of his voice. Her eyes seemed to search until they found him standing between the Rangers. "We're going to get you out of that trap," Jacob continued, his voice steady despite the fear clutching at his chest. "You and your mate. But you need to stay calm, okay?" As if in response, the female bear lowered her head back to the ground. The tension in her massive body seemed to ease, though whether from relief or resignation, Jacob couldn't tell. "She recognizes your voice," Ranger Mills murmured, amazed. "Look how her ears are tracking you." Encouraged, Jacob took a small step forward, still well within the safety zone his father had established. "That's right, remember me? I brought help before, I'm bringing help now." The female bear made a low sound, not a growl, but a sort of rumbling whine that raised the hair on Jacob's arms. It sounded almost like a response. "Be ready," his father instructed the other rangers. If this works, we'll tranquilize her first, then the male. As if responding to a cue, the female bear suddenly lifted her head again and made a different sound, a sharp, barking call that echoed through the trees. From the rocky outcropping, the male bear answered with a weak groan. "They're communicating," Jacob whispered, fascinated despite the tension of the moment. But the bears weren't just communicating with each other. The female's call seemed to be intended for someone else as well. From the forest behind them came a rustling sound, then another, from a different direction. The rangers swung around, tranquilizer guns at the ready. "Dad?" Jacob's voice quavered slightly. "What's happening?" Before his father could answer, a shape emerged from the underbrush, small, dark, and moving with the awkward gait of youth. A bear cub, no more than a few months old. "Oh my God," Ranger Mills breathed. "She has a cub." It wasn't just one cub. As they watched in astonishment, a second cub appeared from another direction, then a third. They converged on their injured father, sniffing anxiously at his fur, making small distressed sounds. "3 cubs," Ranger Dawson said quietly. "That explains everything. She wasn't just trying to save her mate, she was trying to save her children's father." The implications hit Jacob like a physical blow. These weren't just any bears, they were a family. Father, mother, children. The female bear hadn't just shown extraordinary behavior by seeking human help, she had done it to preserve her family. Tears pricked at Jacob's eyes. The stakes had just gotten much higher. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we have to save them both. We have to." His father placed a hand on his shoulder, his expression solemn. "We'll do everything we can, son." The next hours passed in a blur of careful planning and precise execution. The cubs complicated matters significantly. Too young to be tranquilized safely, but old enough to be potentially dangerous if they felt their parents were threatened, they presented a challenge none of the rangers had anticipated. In the end, it was Jacob who suggested a solution. "What if we create a distraction? Something to lead the cubs away temporarily while you work on their parents." Ranger Mills considered this. Food might work. Bears that age are always hungry. "I have some honey in my pack," Jacob offered, "and granola bars." Using the food as bait, they created a trail leading to a small, natural enclosure, formed by fallen logs about 50 yards from the parents. Close enough that the cubs wouldn't panic, but far enough to allow the rangers to work safely. Jacob was assigned to monitor the cubs from a distance, ensuring they remained occupied. From his position behind a thick pine tree, Jacob watched as the rangers tranquilized first the female bear, then her mate. The cubs were too busy wrestling over the honey to notice the brief commotion. Jacob's job was to keep it that way, occasionally tossing another granola bar into the enclosure to renew their interest. The cubs were fascinating to watch, playful and clumsy, with oversized paws they hadn't yet grown into. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Jacob couldn't help smiling at their antics. One cub, slightly larger than the others with a distinctive white patch on its chest, seemed to be the leader. It claimed the best pieces of granola, occasionally swatting at its siblings when they tried to steal a bite. Meanwhile, the rangers worked with practiced efficiency. The trap that held the female bear was similar to the first one, but larger, designed for bears rather than smaller game. Its cruel metal teeth had pierced deep into her paw, and removing it required careful manipulation to prevent further damage. Jacob winced at the sight of blood when Ranger Mills finally lifted the trap away. The male bear's situation was equally concerning. The bandages they had applied the day before were soaked through, and when removed, revealed that the wound had indeed become infected. Red streaks radiated outward from the original injury, and the flesh around it was swollen and hot. "He needs antibiotics," Ranger Dawson said grimly. "Strong ones." "The research station has a wildlife veterinarian," Ranger Mills suggested. "Dr. Abernathy. She could bring what we need." Jacob's father nodded and made the call, his voice low and urgent as he explained the situation. When he hung up, his expression was slightly relieved. "She's on her way. ETA 30 minutes. She's bringing a full medical kit and additional personnel." They used the waiting time to clean both bears' wounds as best they could with their field supplies. Jacob continued his cub-watching duty, fascinated by the family dynamics on display. The cubs had finished the honey and granola and were now exploring their surroundings, occasionally glancing in the direction of their parents. "They're getting restless," Jacob called softly to the rangers. "I think they sense something's wrong." His father nodded. "Keep them distracted if you can. We're almost done here." Jacob dug through his backpack, searching for anything else that might interest the cubs. At the bottom, he found an apple his mother had packed for his lunch. He pulled it out and rolled it toward the cubs. The one with the white chest patch pounced on it immediately, batting it around like a toy before taking an experimental bite. Dr. Abernathy arrived with 2 assistants and a truck full of medical equipment. She was a tall woman with salt and pepper hair and movements that managed to be both brisk and gentle. She assessed the situation quickly, directing her assistants to set up a portable treatment area. 2 adult bears, 3 cubs, and a whole lot of trouble, she muttered, pulling on surgical gloves. Just another day in paradise. Jacob was called away from his cub-watching post to explain what had happened the day before. Dr. Abernathy listened intently, interrupting occasionally with sharp questions. When he described how the female bear had appeared to ask for his help, her eyebrows rose skeptically. "Bears don't ask humans for anything, young man. They avoid us when they can and tolerate us when they must. This one was different," Jacob insisted. "She looked right at me. She showed me her mate." Dr. Abernathy shook her head but didn't argue further. She turned her attention to the injured bears, examining them with practiced hands. The prognosis wasn't good, especially for the male. "The infection is aggressive," she told the rangers. "I can administer antibiotics and clean the wound properly, but he's lost a lot of blood. And even if he recovers physically, bears that have negative experiences with traps often develop problematic behaviors afterward." "What kind of behaviors?" Jacob asked, fearing the answer. "Aggression, fear, inability to hunt effectively due to the injury. Sometimes they become nuisance bears, approaching human settlements for easy food." Her expression was grim. "Often they have to be relocated or even euthanized." "No!" The word burst from Jacob with unexpected force. "You can't kill him. His family needs him." Dr. Abernathy's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, Jacob. But wild animals aren't like people. They don't have the same family structures or dependencies." "These do," Ranger Mills interjected unexpectedly. "I've observed this group before, from a distance. The male is unusually involved in cub rearing, and the female's behavior yesterday and today." She shook her head, seemingly at a loss for words. "We'll do everything we can, Doctor," Abernathy promised. "But you should prepare yourself for the possibility that these bears may not be able to return to a normal, wild existence." The word normal stuck in Jacob's mind as they worked. What was normal for these bears? Had they always been different? More connected to each other? More willing to interact with humans? Or had crisis simply revealed extraordinary qualities that had been there all along? Dr. Abernathy and her team worked for over an hour, cleaning and treating the bears' wounds, administering antibiotics, fluids, and pain medication. They attached small tracking devices to both adults, unobtrusive tags that would allow the rangers to monitor their movements and health from a distance. "We'll need to observe them for at least a week," Dr. Abernathy explained as they packed up their equipment. "Daily visits at first, then tapering off if they show improvement." "And the cubs?" Jacob asked. "They seem healthy enough, though the mother won't be able to hunt effectively for a while with that injured paw. We'll need to provide supplemental food drops nearby." As they prepared to leave, Jacob found himself reluctant to go. The bears were still sedated, the cubs now curled up together in exhausted sleep after their unexpected adventure. The scene looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. How would they fare when they woke, injured and confused? Ranger Mills seemed to sense his concern. "They're strong animals, Jacob. And they have something special. Each other. That male could have abandoned his mate and cubs when he was first injured, but he didn't. The female could have fled with her cubs when he was trapped, but she didn't. Instead, she did something unprecedented. She sought human help." "Will they remember me?" Jacob asked quietly. "Bears have excellent memories, especially for faces and voices, but whether they'll associate you with help or danger." She shrugged. "That remains to be seen." As they walked back to the vehicles, Jacob found himself making a silent promise to the bear family. He would check on them. He would make sure they recovered. Somehow, some way, he would repay the trust the female bear had placed in him. Little did he know this promise would lead him into dangers and wonders beyond anything he could imagine. The days following the rescue passed in a strange mix of routine and anticipation for Jacob. Each morning, he attended school in the village, fidgeting through lessons on fractions and state capitals, his mind constantly wandering to the forest and the bears. Each afternoon, he begged to accompany his father or one of the other rangers on their daily check-ins at the recovery site. Sometimes they let him come. Sometimes they didn't. The bear's condition fluctuated, the female showing steady improvement, the male experiencing setbacks that made Dr. Abernathy's expression grow increasingly concerned. On day 3, Jacob sat with Ranger Mills on a fallen log about 50 yards from where the bears had established their temporary den, a shallow cave beneath a rocky overhang near the stream. Through binoculars, he could see the female bear lying at the entrance, her injured paw extended carefully in front of her. The cubs tumbled and played nearby, seemingly unaware of the gravity of their parents' condition. The male bear remained inside the den, visible only as a dark shape in the shadows. "He hasn't eaten today," Ranger Mills noted, jotting this observation in her field book. "The antibiotics should be helping by now." Jacob lowered his binoculars, worry gnawing at his stomach. What happens if he doesn't get better? She considered this for a moment before answering. "Worst case, we'd have to take him to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. It would mean separating him from his family for weeks, maybe months. Could they survive without him? The cubs, I mean. Cubs that age can survive with just their mother, yes, but this particular family..." She trailed off, watching as the female bear raised her head, sniffing the air in their direction. They're different. More bonded than most bear families I've observed. The female bear was looking directly at their hiding spot now, her nose working overtime. Jacob raised his own binoculars again, meeting her gaze through the lenses. Even at this distance, he felt that strange connection, that impossible understanding. "She knows we're here," he whispered. "Bears have an incredible sense of smell," Ranger Mills confirmed. "She probably caught our scent the moment we arrived." "No, I mean she knows it's us specifically. Look how calm she is." It was true. Despite detecting human presence, the female bear showed none of the usual signs of stress or aggression. She continued to watch their position, her body relaxed, her cubs playing unconcerned nearby. "I've been thinking about what you said happened that first day," Ranger Mills said slowly, "about her asking for your help. I always thought of bears as solitary creatures who tolerate each other when necessary. But watching this family," she shook her head in wonder, "they're rewriting everything I thought I knew." A sharp, barking call from inside the den interrupted their conversation. The female bear immediately stood, limping toward the cave entrance. The cubs froze in their play, then scampered after their mother. "Something's wrong," Jacob said, standing up. "The male—" "Stay here," Ranger Mills ordered, already reaching for her radio. "I need to call this in." But Jacob was already moving, driven by an instinct he couldn't name. The barking call had sounded desperate, urgent, like a cry for help. "Jacob, get back here," Ranger Mills hissed behind him, but he continued forward, moving as quietly as he could through the underbrush. He stopped at a large pine tree about 30 yards from the den, close enough to see, but hopefully far enough to be safe. The female bear had disappeared inside the cave. The cubs hovered uncertainly at the entrance, making small, distressed sounds. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the female emerged, prodding gently at her cubs, herding them away from the den. Her movements were purposeful, almost human in their intent. She gathered the cubs a safe distance away, then turned back toward the cave entrance, and looked directly at Jacob. He froze, certain he'd been spotted. The bear took a limping step in his direction, then another. Jacob's heart hammered against his ribs. This was nothing like their first meeting. This time, he had no rangers with tranquilizer guns nearby, no backup plan. The female bear stopped about halfway between Jacob and the den. She made that same distinctive barking call, then looked pointedly at the cave, then back at Jacob. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. She wasn't threatening him. She was calling to him. Again. "What is it?" he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. "What's wrong?" As if in answer, a low, painful groan emerged from the den. The male bear. He sounded worse than before. Jacob Bennett. Ranger Mills had caught up to him, her face tight with anger and fear. "What do you think you're doing?" "The male bear," Jacob said urgently. "He's worse. And she—" He pointed at the female bear, who was still watching them intently. "She wants us to help. Again." "That's absurd. She's a wild animal defending her territory." "Then why isn't she charging? Why did she move her cubs away? Why is she just standing there, looking at us?" Ranger Mills stared at the female bear, who indeed showed none of the typical aggressive behaviors of a bear protecting her den. Instead, she seemed to be waiting, her gaze flicking between the humans and the cave entrance. "I'm calling your father and Dr. Abernathy," Ranger Mills said finally, reaching for her radio again. "Don't move from this spot." While she made the call, Jacob continued to observe the bear family. The cubs had settled down in a patch of sun about 20 yards from the den, occasionally glancing toward their mother as if seeking reassurance. The female bear maintained her position halfway between Jacob and the cave, her posture alert but not threatening. "Your father's on his way with Dr. Abernathy," Ranger Mills reported, clipping the radio back to her belt. "ETA 15 minutes. Until then, we stay right here." But the male bear's condition didn't seem like it could wait 15 minutes. The groans from inside the den had grown weaker, more intermittent. Jacob remembered Dr. Abernathy's words from the day of the rescue. "He's lost a lot of blood." What if he was losing more, "I think he's dying," Jacob said quietly. Ranger Mills didn't contradict him. Her expression was troubled as she watched the female bear, who had begun to pace anxiously, her injured paw barely touching the ground. "If she wanted to attack us, she would have by now," Jacob pointed out. "She wants our help, just like before. It's too dangerous, Jacob. Even if you're right about her intentions, approaching an injured male bear in a confined space is asking for trouble." Jacob knew she was right. It was too risky. But watching the female bear's increasing agitation, seeing the trust she had placed in humans not once but twice, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. "What if we just got closer?" he suggested. "Close enough to see inside the den, but not to enter it. Maybe we could assess his condition better, give Dr. Abernathy more information when she arrives." Ranger Mills hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the unusual circumstances. Finally, she nodded once. "We'll approach to within 20 yards, no closer. I'll go first. You stay behind me at all times." They moved forward slowly, Ranger Mills with her tranquilizer gun ready. The female bear watched their approach. Her pacing stopped. She made no move to block their path or to call her cubs, who continued to play in the sunny patch nearby. At 20 yards from the den, they stopped. From this distance, they could see deeper into the cave, though shadows still obscured much of the interior. The male bear lay on his side, his massive chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. Even in the dimness, Jacob could see that the bandages on his hind leg were soaked through with fresh blood. "The wound has reopened," Ranger Mills observed grimly. "He's bleeding out." The female bear had moved to stand beside them now, so close that Jacob could have reached out and touched her fur. It was a proximity that defied everything he had been taught about wild animals, especially predators like bears. Yet he felt no fear, only a profound sense of connection with this intelligent creature who had twice sought human assistance. "Can we do anything?" Jacob asked. "Before Dad and Dr. Abernathy arrive?" Ranger Mills assessed the situation, her experienced eyes taking in the male bear's condition and their limited options. "We have a basic field kit in my pack, pressure bandages, coagulant powder. It might slow the bleeding until help arrives." "Let's do it." She looked at him sharply. "I'll do it. You stay here." "But this isn't negotiable, Jacob." "He's weakened, which makes him less dangerous but still capable of killing you with a single swipe if he panics." Reluctantly, Jacob nodded. He watched as Ranger Mills removed the field kit from her backpack and prepared the supplies she would need. The female bear observed these preparations with eerie attentiveness, her dark eyes fixed on the ranger's hands. "Talk to her," Ranger Mills suggested, readying a pressure bandage. "Keep her calm while I approach the male." Jacob swallowed hard and turned to the female bear. "Hey," he said softly, "we're going to help him again, just like before. But you need to stay calm, okay?" The bear's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. She made a low, rumbling sound in her throat, not a growl, but something gentler. "That's right," Jacob continued, maintaining eye contact. "Ranger Mills is going to help your mate now. She's good at this. She knows what she's doing." As if understanding his words, the female bear stepped back slightly, creating more space for Ranger Mills to work. The ranger gave Jacob a quick nod of thanks, then approached the den entrance, movements slow and deliberate. The next few minutes were tense. Jacob kept talking to the female bear in a low, soothing voice, explaining what was happening, even though he knew she couldn't understand his words. Or could she? The way she watched, the way she responded, it seemed impossible. And yet... Ranger Mills worked quickly at the cave entrance, replacing the soaked bandages with fresh ones and applying coagulant powder to slow the bleeding. The male bear was too weak to resist, managing only a feeble groan when she touched his injured leg. "It's bad," she reported over her shoulder. "The infection has spread. He needs IV antibiotics and probably surgery to clean out the wound properly." Jacob's heart sank. That meant removal to the wildlife center, separation from his family. He glanced at the female bear, wondering if she somehow understood the gravity of the situation. Her eyes were fixed on her mate, a strange keening sound emerging from her throat. The sound of a vehicle approaching interrupted the moment. Ranger Mills straightened, relief evident in her posture. "That'll be your father and Dr. Abernathy. I've done what I can for now." She backed carefully away from the den, returning to Jacob's side. The female bear immediately moved forward, entering the cave to check on her mate. Jacob could hear soft sounds from inside, gentle woofs, and rumbling growls that somehow conveyed tenderness rather than aggression. "What you did just now," Ranger Mills said quietly, watching the den. "Talking to her like that, it shouldn't have worked. None of this should be happening." "Maybe we don't understand bears as well as we think we do," Jacob suggested. "Maybe—" She gave him a considering look. "Or maybe it's just this bear, just you." Before Jacob could respond, his father and Dr. Abernathy arrived, moving quickly through the undergrowth with medical equipment in hand. Their expressions shifted from professional focus to astonishment when they saw Jacob and Ranger Mills standing calmly just yards from an active bear den. "What in the world?" his father began. "The situation's deteriorated," Ranger Mills interrupted, already moving to meet them. "The male's wound has reopened, and the infection's worse. He needs immediate intervention." Dr. Abernathy's face grew serious as she assessed the scene. "We'll need to tranquilize both adults. The cubs, too, this time. I can't risk working with an unsedated male no matter how weak he is." Jacob felt a surge of protectiveness. "The female won't hurt you. She wants us to help." Dr. Abernathy gave him a skeptical look. "Even the most docile wild animal becomes unpredictable when cornered or when their young are threatened. I'm not taking chances with anyone's safety." Jacob wanted to argue but knew it would be useless. Adults rarely listened when their minds were made up, especially when it came to safety protocols. Besides, maybe the sedation would help the male bear rest while the antibiotics did their work. The process was efficient but still difficult to watch. First, the female bear, then the weak male, and finally the reluctant cubs. Each received a carefully measured dose of tranquilizer. Jacob watched as the mother bear's eyes fixed on him one last time before the sedative took effect, a look that seemed to contain both trust and resignation. Dr. Abernathy worked quickly once all the bears were unconscious, cleaning and redressing the male's wound, administering stronger antibiotics directly into the bloodstream, and taking samples for testing. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she worked. "The infection has reached the bone," she told them finally, peeling off her gloves. "He needs surgery and intensive treatment. I'm sorry, but there's no way around it. We have to take him to the rehabilitation center." Jacob's father placed a hand on his shoulder, anticipating his distress. "It's the only way to save him, son." "But what about her?" Jacob gestured to the sedated female bear. "And the cubs? They need him." "We'll continue to monitor them daily," Ranger Mills assured him. "Provide supplemental food, medical care if needed." "It's not the same," Jacob protested. "They're a family." Dr. Abernathy sighed, her professional detachment softening slightly. "I understand your concern, Jacob, but we have to make difficult choices sometimes. Either we separate them temporarily, or we lose him permanently." Put that way, there wasn't really a choice at all. Jacob nodded reluctantly, then asked, "How long will he be gone?" "Hard to say. A few weeks at minimum, possibly months. Months? The word felt like a stone in Jacob's stomach. The cubs will be so much bigger by then. What if they don't remember him? What if she doesn't wait? The adults exchanged glances, clearly not having considered this possibility. It was Ranger Mills who finally answered. Bears have strong memories, especially for scent. And this family has already shown extraordinary bonds. We have to trust in that. As they prepared to transport the male bear, strapping his massive sedated body onto a special stretcher designed for large wildlife, Jacob approached the female and cubs one last time. They looked so peaceful in their drug-induced sleep, unaware that their family was about to be torn apart. "I'll look after them," he whispered to the unconscious male bear, "until you come back." The trip to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center took nearly 2 hours, winding down from the mountains into the lower valley where the sprawling facility was located. Jacob insisted on coming along, unwilling to let the bear out of his sight until he was sure he would receive proper care. The rehabilitation center was larger than Jacob had expected, with separate enclosures for various species and a modern veterinary clinic at its center. Dr. Abernathy was greeted by colleagues who seemed unsurprised by the arrival of an injured bear, apparently a common occurrence. "We'll take good care of him," the lead veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, assured Jacob after examining the bear. "We've treated similar infections before. It's good you found him when you did." Jacob nodded, watching as they transferred the still sedated bear to a large indoor recovery pen. "Can I visit him?" Dr. Martinez hesitated, looking to Jacob's father for guidance. "Jacob has a special connection with this bear family," his father explained, "something I've never seen before in 20 years as a ranger." Dr. Martinez raised her eyebrows but nodded slowly. "Weekend visits only, and supervised at all times. We need to minimize human contact as much as possible if he's going to return to the wild successfully." The ride home was quiet. Jacob lost in thoughts of the bears and the strange events of the past few days. His father seemed to sense his mood, letting him process without interruption until they were nearly back to Pine Ridge. "You did a good thing, Jacob," he said finally. "Not many people would have had the courage to help a wild bear, let alone twice." "I still don't understand why she came to me," Jacob admitted. "Of all the humans in these woods, why a kid?" His father considered this. "Maybe because you were small, less threatening. Or maybe," he hesitated, "maybe because children see things differently." "You didn't hesitate or overthink. You just helped." The words stayed with Jacob as they returned home, as he explained to his worried mother what had happened, as he lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. Children see things differently. Was that it? Or was there something more to his connection with the bears? Something he couldn't yet understand. The days that followed settled into a new routine. School in the mornings, then afternoons spent either at the rehabilitation center visiting the male bear, whom Jacob had started calling Atlas, after the titan who carried the world on his shoulders, or in the forest with Ranger Mills, checking on the female and cubs. The female bear was recovering well physically, her injured paw healing cleanly without signs of infection. But Jacob couldn't help noticing changes in her behavior. She seemed more withdrawn, less vigilant with the cubs. Sometimes she would sit for hours staring in the direction of the place where they had taken her mate, making occasional low moaning sounds that broke Jacob's heart. "She's grieving," he told Ranger Mills during one of their observation sessions. "Bears don't grieve, Jacob," she replied automatically, but her tone lacked conviction. "They adapt." "Look at her," Jacob insisted. "She knows he's gone. She misses him." Whether Ranger Mills believed him or not, the evidence of the female bear's distress was hard to ignore. Even the cubs seemed affected, their play less boisterous, their movements more cautious, as if they sensed their mother's sadness. At the rehabilitation center, Atlas was making slow but steady progress. The infection responded to the aggressive antibiotic treatment, and his wound was healing cleanly after surgery to remove damaged tissue. Jacob visited every Saturday, sitting quietly outside the recovery pen, talking softly to the bear about his family. "Your cubs are getting so big," he would say, "especially the one with the white chest patch. He's the leader now, and your mate is healing well, but she misses you. We all do." Dr. Martinez observed these one-sided conversations with professional interest. "He does seem calmer when you're here," she admitted during Jacob's third visit. "Most bears in captivity show stress behaviors, pacing, excessive grooming, aggression, but he just listens when you talk. It's remarkable." "When can he go home?" Jacob asked, the question that had been foremost in his mind since the bear's arrival. "Not for a while yet. The infection is under control, but he's still very weak, and we need to be certain he can survive in the wild before we release him." "His family needs him," Jacob said simply. Dr. Martinez's expression softened. "I know you believe that, Jacob, and maybe you're right. But our first responsibility is to ensure he doesn't suffer." Jacob nodded, understanding the logic even as his heart rebelled against it. As he prepared to leave, Dr. Martinez called him back. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," she said, her tone casual but her eyes intent. "Ranger Mills mentioned that the female bear sought you out specifically when her mate was first injured. Can you tell me more about that?" Jacob described the first encounter in detail. The female bear's approach, her strange behavior, the way she had seemed to lead him to her trapped mate. Dr. Martinez listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. "And this happened again at the den? She called to you when the male's condition worsened?" "Yes." "She made this barking sound, and she looked right at me, then at the den, then back at me. Like she was saying, 'He's in here, he needs help.'" Dr. Martinez tapped her pen against her clipboard, considering. "Jacob, have you ever heard of interspecies communication studies?" He shook his head. "It's a field that examines how different species interact and communicate with each other. Most of the research focuses on animals that have evolved alongside humans. Dogs, horses, some primates. But there's a small subset of studies looking at wild animals that show unusual aptitude for understanding human intentions and signals." Jacob leaned forward, intrigued. "Like these bears?"